Well, I am so thankful for this opportunity to be here. Sometimes I feel I am not really qualified, but I love these things that God qualifies the unqualified, I guess. So it's a privilege to be here, and I believe that God has blessed me with a message to bring to us today. And I wanted to share first something that happened a few weeks ago. So I was in Idaho, and I was having my annual fundraiser there. And one of our coworkers with the organization called Serve Now that I work for, I had to pick him up from the airport, and one of our hosts, and we decided we are going to have, we're going to have an early dinner. We are going to go to Panera Bread, and that's where we are headed to. And we drove through the traffic, and we were cutting through the traffic, and our coworker, his name is Paul. He's married to a Ukrainian lady, and they have 3 little kids. And so as we drove through the traffic heading to Panera Bread to have our early dinner, he sees this chain of restaurant called Raising Chicken. I've never heard of it before. He lives in Colorado Springs, and they have lots of chains of those restaurants there. And he says his kids love this restaurant. I'm going, what is so special about this restaurant here? And he says, you don't know, they make the best chicken nuggets ever. And I love me some good chicken nuggets. I love some good chicken nuggets. And Paul, he goes on to describe these chicken nuggets, and he says, these chicken nuggets are the best that I've ever tasted. Oh, how the meat is so tender, and it's so juicy. And I'm going, what is happening? He's explaining these chicken nuggets. Mind you, I headed to Panera Bread. That's where we're going to go have our dinner. And he goes on to say, oh, and the sauce is to die for. And I'm seated at the back seat, and I'm going, why don't we just go there? It's right close right there. Why don't we just go there? Because he had sold this restaurant, and I'm going, we don't have to go all the way to Panera Bread, which is a couple of minutes away. Why don't we just go to something that is close right here? And so we reroute. We change our destination and reroute to Raising Chicken to just go check it out. And we had to cut through a few exits, and as we made our way out there, reaching there, it was a drive-through. We reached there, and it was not even open. And I was disappointed. And I'm going, this was fast, this was quick. We had a final destination where we were headed, but we got rerouted because there was something quick, something faster. But reaching there, we're not even offered what we thought we would get. And my message today, for those that are taking notes, it's called Finishing Well. How do we get to finish well? As I began that today is the last Sunday of November, and we are not too far away from 2026. But to some of you maybe who made year resolutions beginning of January, and you wanted to do certain things in 2025, when you look at that, I don't know where you are, but one of the things that I had on my list was to read about 12 books. I do have a friend of mine who reads 100 books in a year. Crazy. He reads 100 books in a year, and I'm going, I want to try at least read about 12 books. But ask me where I am at. I've not even made it to 6 books, but that's how I was not able to finish what I wanted to. And well, as I prayed and I struggled with what to share with you today, a few messages came to my mind, but none was feeling quite right. And I don't really just want to share messages. I want always to share something that truly, truly matters to each one of us and minister to our hearts, and something that will make a difference. Right here, right now, to every single person in this place. Well, that's when a verse came to my mind. It comes from 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7, which is very familiar to all of us, and it says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I don't know if this is true for you right now, but I know for me that it's been really an exhausting season that I just came out of, and life pulling me in so many different directions. And lots of responsibilities, and I've been praying constantly to God, God, I just need strength. I need strength to be able to carry on, to finish well. Just feeling really tired physically, but also internally feeling really tired. And as I prayed about that, another verse came to my mind, which is Isaiah chapter 40 from verse 1, which says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." But the verses that come even after that say that he gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. Now, when it says youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, youth represent those who you would not typically equate with being tired or weary. Youth represent strength, vitality, and energy. But perhaps we could substitute that to even maybe pastors or leaders or living as a Christian life. We could substitute that to even the godliest of the godliest and the most passionate of saints, that they all have seasons where they are tired, unmotivated, and weary. Even seasoned leaders stumble and fall and have their own struggles and trials. Now listen, there are seasons in life that are just plain hard to simply keep going. And we have to remember that we are in a world that can beat us up and beat us down. Life can wear us out and wipe us out. Sometimes we go numb, and sometimes we only know pain. Sometimes it is a battle to believe and even to keep believing. I am always inspired by this man in Mark chapter 9, verse 24, where the father of a demon-possessed boy cries out to Jesus and says, "Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief." Because sometimes it's hard to even believe. Sometimes we get weary in our own walk with God. Sometimes faith or trust does not come easy. And sometimes we simply need to hang in there and to hold on to Jesus, even when we feel nothing, even when we feel empty, even when we just want to quit the fight. And at times it can be tempting to even just want to quit or hide or isolate because we are tired and the fight becomes so hard. Just as it's easy to start anything new, there is a form of excitement when we want to start something new. We are motivated. We're like, I am going to do this. We are so determined when something new is happening. For example, let's say a parent, they're having their first child. That's something new that is happening. There is a joy that is happening. But wait till the child becomes a teenager. That joy sort of comes down. When you get something new, maybe when you get a new gift, maybe when you enter into a new relationship, you're excited. It is always exciting to start something new. But it is just as easy to give up, to bail out, and to cease trusting when the fight becomes hard. And being a follower of Jesus is not something that is easy. The Christian life is not one that is easy, but a worthy one. Our belief, the truth we believe, is tested on many accounts. On many accounts with constant pressures, constantly seeing people in need and facing difficult situations. There is always constant problems to solve. I mean, when you look at our world right now, there's so many problems, so many people in need, so many things that need solutions. But where can we even get the solutions? It can be weary. Constantly being pulled in 1,000 directions. I mean, when you look at our schedules are full. And we are told to do 1,000 things and to do them well, not just doing them. And when we look at everything happening, social and worldly standards or pressures that test our loyalty to God every single day. No wonder the Bible, when you look through the Bible, you will find that only 1 out of 4 leaders in the Bible finish well. And only 75% of those leaders do not end their lives well. Most falling into sin or falling away from the faithfulness of God. So for Paul to write as he writes when he was nearing the end of his life and leadership, that he had to fight the good fight, finish the race, and kept the faith, that is saying something that only few of us can say. So the question then becomes, how do we finish well? Well, let's talk about the language that Paul uses here. First, he says he has fought a good fight. And let's start with this overlooked but true reality. A life of faith must be fought for. We are in a spiritual war, whether we want it or we don't want it. The moment that you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, a war began. A war for your soul, a war for the truth that you came to know. We are in a constant battle. And I like to say that life is not a playground, but rather a battlefield. Therefore, if we are in a war, then we must fight. We must acknowledge that we are in a fight and fight the good fight. I want us to notice that Paul didn't just say a fight, but the good fight. There are many battles that we could fight in life, and perhaps some of us are even fighting the wrong battles. And maybe perhaps some of us are fighting the battles that we were never even meant to fight. But the fight that we have to fight, it's a fight of good faith. That is a good fight. It is a worthy fight. It is a fight that is worth it. And today, I don't know where you might find yourself. I don't know what situation that you might be going through, but in my kind of job, I get to interact with a lot of people from all different walks of life. And almost every believer that I encounter, that I get to talk to, probably has at least one, or if not more people in their families who has left the faith, who have fallen away from the faith, who have what is called deconstructed, which is the idea of taking something apart, dismantling what they held to once be true. I had a meeting recently with one of a business person that we were working on a project, and he had gone through a training with this company for a couple of years, and they offered him a 6-figure pay, but he turned it down. And as he shared, I asked him, why did you turn it down? He said, well, it was a good organization and it was a Christian organization, but I didn't like the atmosphere. I didn't like the boss. And when he mentioned Christian, that was a cue for me to ask, are you a believer? Do you believe in God? And he answered and said, well, I grew up in church, professed my faith in Jesus, attended church, and I was very active, but he'd given up. He not only had walked away from his faith, but doesn't believe even God exists anymore. And when I had a conversation with him about what happened, he was very honest with me and told me that he was tired of struggling and suffering. He was tired of fighting and also not believing in God anymore. That he mentioned that actually relieved him of the struggle and trying to wrestle with God. It was easier for him to walk away from God than continue wrestling with God. And then he had been through a lot of suffering and the church hurt, and so many things had happened in his life. Things just didn't work out the way he expected that they would, and so it was easier for him to give up on the fight and to walk away from God and feeling like God didn't care. And you know what? I don't completely blame him. I have faced some terrible losses in my life, grief and suffering, and maybe some of us here have also faced difficult situations in our lives. Situations where I also questioned the sovereignty of God. Did God really care? Was he even present? This was what this guy he was wrestling with when he walked away from God. But I can't walk away from the faith. I can't walk away from the fight, because I don't know where else to turn. I like what Jesus tells his disciples when he didn't meet the crowd's expectations and many turned away from him. He asked the disciples, are you going to leave too? And Peter spoke up and said, basically, yeah, we might leave. We don't understand many of the things that you're saying. We don't even know what you're doing. We don't get what you're doing. But where else can we go? That is Peter's response. Many of us want to turn to the world, turn to sex, to idols, to being workaholics, or success, or different things we want to turn to. But Peter answered and says, where else can we turn to? Because you have the words of eternal life. Peter knew that there is no any other place to turn to, even though the fight had got hard. He knew that the best place to turn to, it's only to Jesus, because he's the only one who can offer eternal life. I think of Jacob. When Jacob wrestled with the angel, he refused to let go until he was blessed. Well, Jacob left that fight limping. He didn't just give up on the fight, but he also left that fight blessed. He fought a good fight. He overcame and was victorious simply because he refused to let go. Listen, the life of faith, it is a fight. It is messy. It is bloody, and the fight is not easy. We get beat up at times. We get the wind knocked out of us. We experience pain. We get weary and tired. But we have to refuse to walk away. We know it's a good fight. We know it will be worth it in the end. And I love one of the US president who, in one of his speeches, and he spoke and it said, even though he didn't mean this about faith specifically, but he writes and he says that it is not the critique who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, but there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms and the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. At this place, never be cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. The fight of faith is worth fighting for, but requires grit and determination. Again, I don't know about a comparable story that might be, but years ago there was a movie called Rocky. Anybody ever watched that movie, Rocky? It was actually based on a true story, and Rocky was fighting a known boxer called Muhammad Ali, and he was considered to be the greatest of all time. And while he didn't win the fight, he did finish the whole fight. And there is a line in one of the movies that says, Rocky says to his sons that, this is what he says. He says, let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't sunshine and rainbows. It is a very mean and nasty place. And I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. It's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. Now that's winning. That is how winning is done. We gotta stay in the fight, and we know that it takes great determination, perseverance, and endurance. And we gotta push through the pain for us to be able to finish well. I want us to be a church, I want us to be believers that finish well, that are able to stay in the fight no matter how hard it gets. The second image that Paul gives is that of running the race, because we are also in a race. But this is not just a quick sprint. It is a marathon that we are in. I'll never forget when I was in primary school. I think it's called elementary school. And the first time I ran in a race, I didn't understand the importance of pacing myself. I took off from the start as fast as I could. And while I got ahead of everyone at the beginning, I also got tired faster than everyone else. And what ended up happening is that one by one, everyone else started passing me, and I'm wondering what is going on. until I ended up in the very last place and I never engaged in sports again. That was the end of it all. I started strong, but I didn't end well. In that story, we have to learn that we have a race to run and it requires perseverance. Paul will use that imagery again in Hebrews chapter 12 from 1 to 3 when he writes and he says, therefore, we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. I love that it says we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. That means that we have people to look up to that went before us that ran this race, but they finished the race. We have the people from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and maybe people in your life that you look up to, and that is such a great cloud of witnesses that if they endured and finished, then you too can finish the race. We have a great cloud of witnesses to look up to. And Paul writes and says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. Have you ever tried to put something apart that is entangled, and how hard to put it apart? So every time we get entangled with things that are of this world, that things that don't really align with our calling or with our purpose in life, entangling that becomes difficult. That sometimes it requires cutting and putting apart. And so Paul says, let us throw off everything that would hinder our race, that would hinder our fight. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. We all have a race that is marked out for us, each one of us. And I was thinking maybe sometimes we try to run other people's races, yet we have our own personal race to run. And that's why maybe the fight becomes hard, because we are trying so much to run someone else's race instead of focusing on the race that is marked out for each one of us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. That means we got to get our focus right. Our focus has to be on Jesus, and I'm reminded by Peter, every time that he was able to walk on water, fixing his eyes on Jesus, he did the impossible, walking on water. But every time his focus shifted, that's the moment he started to sink. And every time our focus shifts from Jesus, that's when we begin losing the fight. That's when we lose heart. That's when we start giving up. So our focus has to be on the right direction, focusing on Jesus. Why? Because he's the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. He's the only one who can perfect our faith. We cannot perfect our faith by our own selves. Why? Because for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners. Consider him, Jesus. Don't consider anything else, but consider him who endured. Him who overcame, that he overcame and stood against opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart on your journey of faith. The life of faith requires perseverance. It requires focus, keeping our eyes on Jesus, remembering the suffering that he endured for the joy that was set before him, so that we do not grow weary and lose heart and not to drop out of the race. Again, in Corinthians chapter 9 to 25, 27 says, Paul will return to running and boxing language, saying this, that everyone who competes in games goes into strict training. They do not get a crown. They get a crown that will not last. They get a crown that will perish. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air, nor I strike to blow to my body and make it a slave, so that after I have finished preaching to others, that I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. There is eternal beauty ahead. There is a heavenly reward in store. And that's why we need to only fight the good fight of faith, not only to finish the race, but to keep the faith. Luke chapter 18, verse 8 tells us that, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Will he find you keeping the faith? We need to keep fighting, keep running, keep the faith, and sometimes that is what faith looks like. Simply not quitting, not giving up, not dropping out, not letting go of Jesus. That is the kind of faith that we want. And faith, we know faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things that are unseen. And sometimes the evidence is a transformed heart. Sometimes the evidence is when we don't grow weary. And sometimes the evidence is when we don't give up, even when life hits so hard. And it's going to. But you know what? I love what I say, that we keep focusing on Jesus. We stay in the fight. We are not the ones who easily give up, but we stay in the fight. Because there is a reward at the end. Our fight doesn't stop here on earth. And I know sometimes the enemy would put us in a corner and whisper lies to us and tell us, well, maybe you better quit. Maybe you better stop. But our focus is on Jesus, who endured the worst pain of all. That if he was able to overcome, then we too can overcome. And I know today is the last Sunday of November, but I don't want us to wait till January for us to look at our fight and say, this is what I'm going to fight for. We don't have to wait for January to say, I am going to start this, I'm going to do this, we can start today and write out, how am I going to plan my fight? What fight do I need to not give up? Maybe I wasn't able to make in 2025, but I'm going to rewrite the story. I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to reroute some things so that I do not lose heart. I do not grow weary. And I love that he gives strength to the weary, that he renews our minds, that he transforms us. That's how we keep our faith, is when we have determination, grit, perseverance, discipline, endurance, that we keep running our race, not looking back, not looking to the side, to the right, or to the left, but our focus being kept on Jesus alone, who is the author and the perfecter of our faith.